From heading back into the fray to help out an old friend and his daughter, to narrating his life story as a young Jardani Jovovich of the Ruska Roma crime family, here are the 5 ways that Keanu Reeves can still return to the John Wick franchise. The first one's obvious, and it's John returning from the dead. Now, I know that Chapter 4 makes it very clear that he's dead and at peace. He's freed himself from the high table and can now rest easy next to his wife Helen. But Chapter 4 ended rather cryptically. The Bowery King and Winston stand near his grave and say their goodbyes to Baba Yaga, and King asks Winston whether John went to hell or heaven. The manager of the Continental responds with a casual smirk, suggesting that he might know more about John's whereabouts than he's letting on. And then there's John's dog, who very briefly looks off camera to a spot far away. Fans have speculated that the dog was able to catch a whiff of his owner's scent and saw that he was standing near the edge of the cemetery. I know that's a bit of a jump, but you can't blame the fans for hoping their favorite assassin's alive, right? So, assuming that John survived his duel and Winston helped him go into hiding, you can safely say that John's enjoying a well-deserved vacation somewhere far, far away from New York, or any location that's affiliated with the High Table. And if Chad Stahelski and Keanu Reeves decided that a 5th chapter needs to happen, they're going to need a really good reason to disturb Baba Yaga's peace. The most logical way to do that is to focus on the post-credits scene in Chapter 4. We saw Kane being approached by a vengeful Akira who swore that she'd find him and kill him if Wick didn't. And knowing Kane, he's going to be prepared for that. And he'll successfully dodge Akira's first attack. But he needs to protect his daughter, because Akira would go after her if she couldn't get to Kane. So, Kane would most likely search for John somewhere in the Moroccan desert in order to get his help protecting his daughter. But this approach to Chapter 5 has a huge downside. It could taint John's legacy at the end of Chapter 4. There's no denying that the audience wants more. More Keanu, more Bowery King, more gun fu, and more stylized action that only Chad and his stunt teams can pull off. The 4th movie made over $419 million at the box office, and Lionsgate would be insane not to continue pumping out sequels. In fact, they're totally open to greenlighting a 5th movie if Chad and Keanu agree to it. But what about John's death? How do you sidestep that little obstacle? Again, I'm not saying bringing him back from the dead isn't an option, it's just that it would undermine that beautiful ending of Chapter 4. John fought the table on his terms, he ended the fight and killed Vincent on his terms, and he died free of his obligations to the High Table. It was a perfect, emotional ending to a film series that began about 9 years ago. If Chapter 5 undid that, then a majority of the fans aren't going to be happy about it. They agree that there's no need for a sequel, but what if Lionsgate went ahead with it anyway? Well, one way to ensure that the series keeps going is by heading into John's past. More particularly, John Wick 5 could take place during Viggo Tarasov's impossible task. Well, in that case, it wouldn't be John Wick 5, it'd be a prequel instead, and would allow the director to hire a younger, more energetic actor who could pull off the stunts that even Keanu couldn't. That's the other thing about a 5th movie. There's only so much Keanu can do without getting injured. He is pushing 60 after all. So, a younger actor allows for intense action sequences, letting the director create more diverse and intense action set pieces. Anyway, we've always heard about Viggo's impossible task, but we've never seen it in any flashbacks. He hyped it up so much in the first movie that fans have always speculated just how epic it was. Just John, his guns, and a sea of enemies that he mows down one by one. Maybe the movie could recreate the infamous pencil scene that Viggo talks about so fondly. Oh, and this would also reintroduce Santino D'Antonio as a major character. If the franchise decides to do a prequel, then John could have a more amiable relationship with the man. He was the one who helped John with the impossible task, so this time he could appear as John's ally and friend. It'd be an interesting dynamic to explore, don't you think? Now, as for who'd play John, a younger actor is the obvious choice, but so is Keanu. Remember, the impossible task takes place about 5 years before the events of the first movie. John's not going to change in appearance that much during that time period. So a little de-aging and Keanu would look 10 years younger. Or you know what? Keanu stopped aging when was like 30, so you wouldn't need any de-aging software to make him look young. Still, whether Chad goes for a younger actor or Keanu is up to him. But a prequel sounds like a really good idea. If you're not in the mood for a prequel and don't like the idea of John returning to save Kane, then what about a Logan-style epilogue movie? There was a fan theory that said the John Wick films are a personification of grief, that each movie was a stage of grief that the main character goes through over the course of 2 hours. The first was denial, second was anger, third was bargaining, fourth was depression, and the fifth would be acceptance. That theory's no longer valid, of course, since he's already dead. But what if you could rework the theory so that the fifth movie was still about acceptance? So, John's won against the high table. He has his freedom, and he's been off the grid for a long time. The world of assassinations and luxurious hotel rooms has changed. It's not the way he and Winston left it, and the Bowery King is long gone. There are no rules, and the high table has become more oppressive and tyrannical than before. And our hero this time isn't just John, but Mr. Nobody, who's now in his mid-40s. He's trying to survive the new world, and he's trying to track down Baba Yaga. In between, he meets tons of enemies, including Akira, and he barely makes it on his own. But one day he finds Baba Yaga, who's now in his mid-60s or early 70s, and they develop a mentor-mentee relationship that finally ends with John heading out into the sunset, accepting his fate. What fate that is, I don't know. But I bet Chad and Keanu could come up with something similar to Hugh Jackman's Logan. Does that sound good to you? Anyway, the director and actor duo might as well bring back John for one final shootout with the high table. The Marquis was given the combined power of the table in order to bring Wick down. He was literally like a dog let off his leash. But now that he's dead, it's safe to assume that the 12 members of the high table are back in power, and no one knows who they are. John's already killed the one who sits above the high table, but he was just a small piece of the puzzle. John faking his death and going into hiding would allow him to come back and track down the remaining high table members across the world. He could even hit up Kane and ask for the favor he owes him at the end of Chapter 4. I bet the fans would be more than happy to see John and Kane team up the way they did during the 222 steps fight sequences. Donnie Yen is a beast, and watching him fight alongside Keanu in Chapter 5 would be a treat. But there are fans who'd be against this idea too, no matter how appealing the Donnie-Keanu duo is. Winston tells John that eliminating the high table is an impossible task, because they're like the heads of a hydra. Cut off one and another will take its place before it even hits the floor. So, while it's certainly one way to bring Keanu back into the fray, it's not the only way. But what's the one way Keanu could come back in a way that'd make sense for the franchise and allow it to grow beyond Chapter 4? Well, a prequel comes to the rescue once again. But this time, it doesn't have to be about Vigo's impossible task. It could be an origin story about the Baba Yaga from the moment he was adopted by the Ruska-Roma family to the moment he became the most feared assassin in the world. Chad could hire a much younger actor for this role, someone in their mid-20s or early 30s, who could pull off intense action sequences and speak more than 380 words. Just kidding, of course. But yeah, now that the John Wick franchise is expanding into prequels, such as The Continental and Ballerina, it'd make sense to go for a John Wick sequel. And as for how Keanu could return, he'd be the narrator throughout the whole movie, and hopefully this would let him speak more than 380 words. So from a prequel that would explore the long and complicated life of a young John Wick to returning from the dead to help out Kane and his daughter, those were the 5 ways that Keanu Reeves can still return to the John Wick franchise.